Welcome to the What Anyone Can Do podcast with Leo Batari and me, Randy Cantrell. This show picks up where our previous show, You're the Peer, left off, highlighting the simple truth that who you surround yourself with matters, and that if we enlist the support of others, give back to those who give to us, and pay it forward for the next generation, we can do anything. Author and keynote speaker Leo Batari and I talk with a diverse group of thought leaders who will share stories and insights that will help you succeed in business and in life. How? By doing the things anyone can do, but most of us never will. Welcome back to another episode of What Anyone Can Do, the podcast. He is Leo Batari. My name is Randy Cantrell. And Happy New Year and happy holidays and all of that good stuff. We were going to kind of focus on a recent article that you wrote on 3 laws of communication as we enter this new year and a new decade. Leaders, especially leaders, they should be focused on getting their message more clearly seen. I know a lot of buzz is around this whole 2020 notion, which I rather like and am fond of, a year of clarity, and it probably begins with clear communication.
Yeah. I mean, as you know, of course, we've been a little light during the holiday season, spending a little more time with friends and family and less on the podcast, but it's been great. And I know, we both have enjoyed some time away and doing that, which has been awesome. It's been, and I hope everyone else is doing the same and kind of thinking about, 2020 and what they're going to do. Of course, there's always debate over whether, technically, our sensibilities tell us that this is the start of a new decade. It's really the end of the old one. But, when we hit 2000, man, once we were making that change, then that becomes this forward view of things, which is probably a good thing.
Yeah.
But the piece that you mentioned, I thought it was pretty appropriate for 2020, because when we start thinking about being leader and how we view communication and what that looks like, I think it's essential. And basically the 3 laws, and I stated them right up front and then get into these kind of 3 truths of communication. One being that communication is 100%. When I mean communication, I mean the effective delivery of the communication as intended is 100% the responsibility of the sender. And you get a lot of people saying, wait a minute now, why is that? And why doesn't the receiver have some responsibility here? Well, they certainly do. But the question really is more about the leader making sure that the message is received and that they follow through on that and check on that in a way that assures a level of clarity about what's going on. And the lesson that I always bring up that taught me that in no uncertain terms was back in junior high school when I had to fill in for the 1-mile relay team. I was running the 3rd leg, which is usually what the slowest kid on the team runs, the 3rd leg, but I was substitute, and I'd practiced it a number of times. I was actually really excited about doing it. And sure enough, I get the baton, I run, I actually catch the guy and get a slight lead before I go to pass the baton to our anchor leg, which is the fastest kid in the city. And I'm like, okay, this is good. Of course, I go to hand him the baton hits the ground. And of course, it's game over right there. That's you're all done. And so it was devastating. And not to mention, there was no one in the team talking to me after our undefeated season was blown in that particular race. And I'm wondering, what happened here? And of course, the coach, in his own way, gave me real clarity about whose fault it was. It was mine. And he said, basically, you don't let go of that baton until you're sure that person has grasped it, that they've got it. And Well, I would love to have that moment back all the time. It still to this day becomes the greatest lesson in leadership communication I've probably ever received. I think that you can decide that, hey, if I sent the memo, it was right there in paragraph 8, look at the fine print, do whatever. Or you can take a position as a leader that says, I want to make sure if that message was worth sending, it was worth making sure that it was received with clarity and with understanding. And so yeah, I think that's a real important thing. And I think that's a leap for some people to make, to understand that they own all that. I think most good CEOs understand that. And I hope that most leaders in companies understand that as well, and don't use the failed delivery, if you will, as something that they don't own. So that was kind of the first one. The second one really spoke to the fact that while the message and its effective delivery as intended is 100% my responsibility, if you look at employees and where they typically get their information from and where they assign meaning to that information, it doesn't come from the CEO or the board of directors. It comes typically from fellow employees, which is kind of an interesting thing now. So you think these are contradictory, but they're actually not. The CEO delivers the message, but where they discover meaning is not unlike the story that I mentioned about, Taylor in the classroom, right? Where she was in childcare and they had a Halloween party that day, and there was a witch that was invited to play, with the kids. Of course, the witch walks in, kids are scared to death. One kid cries, the next one spreads like wildfire. Kids are going crazy in there. Taylor happened to be watching this thing, runs up to the front of the room and basically says, it's okay. She's not real. There's no need to be afraid. And of course, the kids look at Taylor, they look at each other. Okay, order's restored, the witch stays, everything's good, and all that. So I think that story shows us a couple of things. One is that for as long as we can remember, we look to others to send us signals when things aren't right. So we're constantly looking at that. So that first kid who cried sent that signal to someone else that something's not cool here, something's not good. And everyone gets upset, and it starts this chain reaction. By the same token, when it came to, somebody, clearly the teachers would have restored order eventually, but I'd suggest that, it happened a little more quickly when one of their own says, we're good here. And the exact same things happen in the workplaces. This isn't just preschoolers. This is just how we're hardwired to do what we do as grown-ups, which is look to one another. We hear an announcement, we hear about a new initiative and all that. We're going to one another and we're looking for signs from other people about, okay, is this good? Is this not? Is this going to be successful? Boy, they had an announcement like this last year with all this fanfare, and 3 months later, no one was talking about it anymore. Is this another one of those? Are they going to, basically put the football down there and pull it away when we go to kick it? So there's a lot of those kinds of things where employees, really look to one another. And the Edelman Trust Barometer really provides the data around that. And I think my daughter's story kind of shows its proof point about, again, how we're hardwired to look to one another during those situations. So now, as a CEO, you're trying to provide clarity. You understand that trust really lies and rests with employees of one another. So then how do you think in terms of not just vertical communication, right? The classic, and I hope gone are the days for most companies where, the CEO and the senior leadership team, they go off on a retreat at like Greenbrier or something for X number of days. No offense to Greenbrier, but you know what I'm saying? It's this kind of a, right. They go away, they do their trip, they come back, they impart their wisdom on the rest of the organization, hope it trickles on down in the hope that, something's good going to happen, which, as we know, depending on what research you want to look at, 65 to 90% failure rate on those kinds of things, right? So now it becomes a question of, if I want to make sure that everyone gets the message, and if other employees are the people we trust, then how can I do a good job of communicating horizontally versus so much vertically? So it isn't about, sometimes those key influencers, those people that employees pay attention to aren't necessarily the highest up on the org chart with a big fancy title. They might be that person who's just a really, really great individual, really magnanimous personality. Someone else has a real technical expertise. Someone's just been there a super long time and everybody loves them and everyone respects the history and everything that they have with the organization. These are often the people that are listened to. So now the question and the challenge for the leader is, how do I get these people involved in, first of all, shaping what we do? Because oftentimes these people are closest to the customer as well. In most cases, they've got a lot of really good ideas. That should be certainly in the mix of, consideration when it comes to how organizations move forward and why. And I think to the extent that we can create these ambassadors in our organization that can help us not only be agents for delivering clarity, but also in getting people inspired and excited and engaged about actually implementing, whatever the organization is looking to do that year and to do so successfully. And so I think for 2020, to the extent that, we can understand A, what our role is, and B, kind of where the power lies, and where I think really being effective matters. I think those three things can go a long way to helping CEOs and helping leaders of teams of any size organization be a little more successful in 2020.
When I read the article, one of the first things that came to my mind for me was, and of course it's very contextual for me and my experience and in running companies and trying to build high performing teams, and starting doing that in my mid-20s, where I look back now and I'm like, I can't believe I did that.
Oh, sure.
And you thought it was the right thing to do to get people on board and whatnot. And you and I are kind of that generation. We've talked a little bit about this before, that zero sum mind game of,
right.
I've got to win at your expense. And sometimes that filtered into the organization. But as I got older and I got into coaching and was coaching hockey and coached little kids and learned an awful lot, as you're coaching 6-year-old kids, and you can tell them what to do, and you can ask them, okay, everybody raise your sticks if you understand, and every stick's going to go in the air, and they haven't got a clue what you just told them.
Right.
And it's clear in your head, but they're 6. They don't have the context that you have. And I'm not at all saying that leaders have this, superiority over employees. There's a big difference when you're in your 40s and that kid's 6. So, but the words that you use still have meaning. You may have seen this video. It's a terrific video. The dad is sitting there and the kid is got a baseball bat and there's a ball on a tee. And the dad says, keep your eye on the ball. And here's the ball. And the kid leans down and puts his eye physically on the ball, and it's that kind of communication. But I learned a really important lesson in that coaching. And that was one step that I realized I had not done as a young leader. And that was the show me step. Show me that you understand what. Now, when you're doing a hockey drill, people can demonstrate it. But what I learned to do is not to just put people on the spot in the room, but to get a conversation going so that I could get feedback that they really do. They get it. They know what I'm talking about. They see it. And of course, then, I kept thinking about this follow the leader that you wrote about and this trust. And players on a team, if that team's been together any length of time at all, they learn to trust each other. They more instantly can trust some, because some kids are just wired that way, like your daughter, who got up in front. And of course, then in hockey, we've got these kids who have these letters on their jersey, a
right.
C or an A, these captains. And good coaches, I think, select those kinds of players that aren't necessarily the most verbal, may be the hardest working, may not even be the most talented, may not even be the most skilled, but you get this sense they've got influence in that locker room. So I was able to incorporate all of those three things without being able to put language to it, as you so aptly did in this article, to make sure that the message was properly heard, properly received, that they absolutely understood it, and that somebody could reinforce that communication among them, and then hopefully to get this thing to just spread. It's a big team chemistry thing, and every organization that I'm involved with and work with, culture is still one of the top subjects that comes up, and all of this, I think, speaks to that.
It's interesting is Gino Auriemma was given a press conference one time, and it was about, of course, the players at UConn, and he was talking about the fact, he said, the kids, he said, they don't do things for two reasons, and there's only two reasons. He said, they either don't understand it, and it says, okay, we'll give them clarity about that, and we'll do that, and we can teach them, and whatever. Or it's, I don't feel like it. And he said, and in some cases, I think kids should just come to practice and just put a sign on your head that just says, "I don't feel like it today, coach." And but I think the point he was making, and I think it speaks to what you mentioned about reinforcement, is there's a bit of clarity, right? There's a bit of inspiring people to the why and kind of understanding and trust and all that, which would actually make the person feel like it because they know that is the way to do it. But then also realizing that it's the other players that show each other how to do it and how to get better more than the coach is telling them. And that goes to the show me step, but it's not just the coach doing it. It's everyone else playing that role, that show me role as well. It speaks to that stuff that we've talked about many times with Etienne Wenger, trainer, and Gene Labe. And this was the early 90s when they were in Africa really to study the relationships between the masters and the apprentices, only to see and I think identify what they later named communities of practice, when although the master had a relationship as a coach does with a player or the master with the apprentice, it was the apprentices and how they worked with one another that helped them really raise their skill level and do what they needed to do. And the understanding of that, and again, speaking to the horizontal nature of things in organization, it isn't about what we can force down through our organization top down, this vertical notion of the org chart and how we kind of see that. But, how do we really inspire and engage others by giving them clarity, by having a culture where people trust one another, can help each other get better. And it just really becomes about being better every day. And that's a, pretty good theme for 2020 when you think about it. It's just a matter of, making sure that as the recipient, by the way, that we admit when we don't have clarity, that we help that leader out, because it's their responsibility that we have clarity. But it's on us a little bit, at least, to show them that we do, and if we don't, to ask those questions, and don't be afraid to, because looking stupid in the moment is not nearly as bad as failure down the road on something that you should have understood to begin with. And I think if we can trust one another to do that and ask questions with the understanding that this is all for the greater good here for everyone, and you're not going to get called out. You're actually going to be applauded for asking the questions that other people probably have as well. It becomes, I think, a good recipe for people really starting to work together and leverage this power of peers that we talk about so often to accomplish things that none of us as individuals could ever do alone.
And leaders need somebody like that in the room. I was talking to a CEO the other day who was not lamenting, but was rather happy that he had, and he didn't use the word contrarian, but he used that kind of language, but he used it in a more positive way, that when he got up in front of this group, that he had this particular individual that he knew was going to ask the question that everybody else was probably going to be a little too timid to ask, and privately was expressing gratitude for having somebody like that in the room. So yeah, I would encourage, be that somebody for the leader, if you're in that room and you don't understand and you need some clarity. Plus, he also made the comment, which is congruent with your article, that he knew that this person had insights into the other people in the room that he himself lacked, because they were peers and he was not.
Right.
And, so he felt confident that this person was capable of kind of reading his cohorts and maybe asking questions that he knew would help the rest of the group. We need more people like that.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, we do. Hey, by the way, as we're looking at 2020, we know, of course, that in the book What Anyone Can Do, and I'm not really, kind of hawking books in the last day of the year, but I will say that there is the idea of having a people plan, whether it's for us as individuals or us as teams, certainly covered in the book, as well as elsewhere in articles and podcasts that we've talked about, with the idea of just real preparation, planning and playing, as we do with our 3 Ps, right? And I think it's just really about not only thinking about what you might want for 2020, but really spend a few minutes identifying the people who you feel can help you make that possible. And talk to them about that. Talk to them about, hey, this isn't just about a New Year's resolution that, over 9 out of 10 people fail at. This is something I actually really want to do. And I would love you to help me in whatever way that looks like, whether it's encouragement or support or advice or accountability, whatever that happens to be part of your little team. It's not going to be difficult, but at least check in with me every once in a while as to how I'm doing. And then also, how can I help you? What do you want for 2020? And can I play a role at all in helping you, or helping you identify the people who could be helpful to you next year? And let's actually, as we begin, whether it's the end of one decade or the start of another, however we look at it, let's see if this time around we can actually accomplish what we set out to do. And my hope for folks as they're listening to this podcast is they think about what do they really want, and it can just be one thing, and it doesn't have to be. We've talked about this before. You're not trying to make the Olympics in 6 months. It could be, something really simple, but identify it, identify the people, enlist their support, do it, and then pick another goal down the road. And you start giving yourself confidence too, that you can actually do what you said you wanted to do for yourself, and that people are willing to help. And it's also incredibly gratifying, by the way, as we all know, when you can help others do that. It's really nice to see other people, accomplish things they want for themselves, and know that you had a hand in that. And, we are most certainly all in this together in that regard. And I hope we really double down on that, even at a time where, politically there seems to be a lot of division and all of that. And I think that while that kind of theme dominates the media and the political landscape, I think by and large, we are still very much wired to work with one another, help one another, be good to one another, and understand that there is, little that we can't accomplish if we do it together, and we don't care who gets the credit. And we're just about, getting it done, and about that win-win that you talked about.
I was going to hawk your book since you weren't going to, and I made the horrible mistake of cleaning my space here during the
That's a good end of the year pursuit, though.
And I and then it dawns on me that I may have loaned it out. I may have
there you
loaned
go.
to a friend, but you should definitely go buy the book. You can find all the details at Leo's website, LeoBottary, LeoBottary.com. I was reminded, and I had to pull it up on my other screen here while you were talking. There's a proverb in the scripture that's super congruent. Proverbs 11:25. The generous soul will be made rich, and he who waters will also be watered himself.
Nice.
So I'll leave you with that.
I
don't think I can top that.
Boom.
Exactly. That's a mic drop.
That's a mic drop right there.
Yeah.
And the only thing I will add, because I think, I want to, show folks we're eating our own dog food here, that I do want to put out there that for 2020, for me, I did a lot of work with groups last year. And this year is going to be the year that I do a lot more work with teams inside organizations. Got some things set up at the end of January in Canada. There's a number of other things that I'm working on in that regard. So I think anyone who's interested in getting their team really together and really thinking about how they can be most effective and how they can feel empowered, not just to look at the leaders, but understand how much they as individuals realize that a great team starts with me, that we as a group and a team can do extraordinary things together. And then we can identify also how our leader can support us in that effort. Uh, and I think to the extent that great servant leaders out there are out there to make sure that their teams are successful, that they are more than willing to hear what the team needs from them in order to make that possible. So I'm real excited about really taking that to a whole new level this year. There are some people that I've certainly identified that I'm going to reach out to in the coming days to help me do more of that, because I think we do a lot with the podcast and all, and and with articles and other content, and a couple of books and all that. And I actually have an outline for a third book right now, because I really would like to take everything that I've learned since the initial work that we did on the Power of Peers and crawl inside the 5 factors for high performing groups and teams, and really extract that. So that's another bit of a goal for me, in 2020, is to get that content in people's hands, likely in the form of a book, but also with more workshops, more keynotes, and do that. And so, Randy, you got that group looming that we got to get rolling this year. So,
and I did, and I'm not hawking my work podcast, but I've had a podcast for a long time at growgreat.com, and I'm rebranding that. And I'm rebranding it to The Power of Others. So thepowerofothers.com. And I just want to pull back and take a broader look at it. I typically have aimed like you. So we're very congruent in kind of where we see the future in 2020, and your work with Peer Innovation and what you just described. I'm wanting to pull back, not just with leaders and not just with business. And I find myself continuing to serve the city government sector, for instance. And here you've got leadership, and you've got people under leadership, and you've got teams trying to be high performing teams, but they're, all of the rules of business aren't necessarily in play. These people have these limited budgets based on the taxes and property taxes and other things that the city brings in. And so I'm wanting to pull back and do similar kinds of focus as you're talking about. I'm building this first charter group of small to medium-sized business owners, but I made a decision over the last 60 days or so. I want the first group to be that group, because these are kind of my people. After that, I don't know. Because what I've learned from you is the power of that connectivity and the power of that community and that context, where if everybody in the room is something that they can all relate to, well, that transcends business. That transcends anything. I mean, I interviewed the executive director of the parents of murdered children over on my other podcast. And I mean, I got fascinated with this group, and I thought, I mean, here's a group that, what a horrible circumstance to find yourself in, to be the parent, or to be a family member, or even a friend of someone that was murdered. And where are they going to go? And that's the only thing that they may have in common.
Yeah.
But boy, what a big thing to have in common.
Right.
So I've learned that context, that if we can relate to one another, then that can develop trust. I mean, these are some things that you've taught me, that your first book taught me, and the second book, and all of our communication. So that's kind of my intent going into 2020.
There's that kind of core of empathy there, no matter what that happens to be. Whatever particular challenge you share or experience you've had that unites you in some way, and allows you to have conversations where you believe the people around you have true understanding, obviously is really important. I love the whole notion of rebranding the podcast. And if you don't mind an on-air thought. It
Yeah, please.
reminds me of if you saw the holiday card I sent out, where I talk about celebrating the power of us.
Yes.
And so, as a thought, in terms of the power of others versus the power of us, which kind of puts us all on the same side of the table. By the way, includes you in the others piece.
Yeah. Great minds think alike. Unfortunately, the domain is not available. So, so there's
That's so funny.
There's live on the air stuff. Yeah, the minute I saw it, I thought, yeah, I'm now thinking more like Leo. I've been hanging around you too much, but yeah. So that's the reason.
Or you can check out the power of we and see if that exists.
And I'm thinking I'm thinking I may have checked that out as well. I'm not sure about that one, but I'm positive about us. I even checked out the power of us or power of us. And I even checked out some that had other suffixes, but unfortunately we live in a world where the .com still rules the roost,
So I know.
So that's
absolutely.
As you and I both know. Well, you ran across that same problem. With the book. You had some great suggestions, but if you can't snag the domain,
you can't own the domain.
Yeah, we're in a tough world like that. Tough. But no, the newsletter was great, and I would speaking of that, encourage people to go over to the website. Again, it's leobatari.com and sign up for your newsletter. Yeah, that was I thought that was particularly timely and poignant. It certainly resonated with me, and of course I'm interested, but I think anybody and everybody can benefit. I have found, and not to sidetrack us too much, but I have found over the course of the last year, I was thinking the other day, okay, what have I learned this year with our work and with some of the stuff that I'm trying to do? And there's a reluctance, and I'll make a true confession here. I made it over on my own web real estate already, but for me, that was the problem. My constraint in 2019, true confession before the whole world, my constraint was relying on other people as much as I should have in all the areas of my life. I basically put my life in 3 circles: spiritual, personal, professional. And in the spiritual one, which is infinitely important to me, supremely important, I should say, I relied on 4 particular guys. 3 of whom were 15, 20 years up the road from me, 1 who's in his mid-40s. All of these guys are guys that I've known. I've known the 3 older guys all my life. Really leaned on these guys. And in that context, didn't have any problem with it. But professionally and personally, including you, who I completely trust, just didn't do it. So I'm sitting at this funeral of one of these mentors of mine, the oldest of them. He was 88. You and I talked about this. So I lost 2 of the 3. The third one is lingering. He's on hospice. So I told the younger guy, I said, it didn't pay in 2019 to be my mentor, my spiritual mentor. They're dropping like flies. But this is the hazard you get with having older mentors. You statistical odds are you are going to outlive them. But I'm sitting there, and I was honored to be asked to be a pallbearer. And I'm sitting there during this service, and I'm thinking about just all of 2019. And for some reason, this epiphany hit me that I have not leaned on people as I should in these 2 big areas of my life, personally and professionally, because I don't want to impose. I don't know where the thought hit me, but I thought, you just don't. So if you're out there and you're listening to us and you're reticent, I get it. Been there, done it, got the T-shirt to prove it, because I lived not just 2019, but I have lived the vast majority of my life being that guy, being reluctant. And I think for me, it's because I am so wired to be the guy that other people lean on. And I'm real comfortable with that. You and I, when we first started the podcast, I told you, man, I'm willing to be your cheerleader. I hate cheering myself. I love hawking you. Your reticence to hold the book up. If that book had my name on it, I couldn't do that. That's just who I am. I don't make any apologies for it. It's just a truth. But I'm sitting there in that funeral, and I'm thinking, that's it. there's my constraint. There's my hurdle, not wanting to impose on people.
And you're not alone. You know that of all so I've done probably 120 some odd workshops for CEO and key executive groups. Here in the U.S., here in the U.S.,
Yeah.
Canada, UK, and I would say right up there among the top 5 most common things that I hear when it comes to bringing topics to the group is someone said, I don't want to bother the group with that. It's bothering them. Chances are it's bothering 5 other people in the room.
Yeah.
Chances are, blah, 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 right? I mean, and yet, so getting people to resist that temptation, do not feel that what you have, regardless of how small or insignificant or whatever you think it may be to others, if it matters to you, raise that issue, raise that topic, have that conversation, and it will be the act of courage and generosity that those things tend to be. It will be something that you will get the benefit of, even if it's just that you got to talk about it, just to say it out loud to another group of people. It's not always about someone solving anything, but in the event you actually do get some other ways to think about it or look at it or other perspective on it, can obviously be really helpful. And then you can also feel really good about the fact that you'll have likely helped a whole bunch of other people in that room when you've done that in a group setting. And I think for all of us, it is really common. And it kind of speaks to, I think, I still think we have to end with that proverb that you read. So I think it deserves one more shout out. Mic drop will be out for 2020. And I think people know, of course, to come to leobottari.com for the podcast, and also for wherever else they want to, listen to their podcast. Of course, it's always available on YouTube if you want to watch. And
let me hawk your teamwork, your peer innovation effort, to try. 2020 is gonna, I think, I'm optimistic, is going to be not just a breakout, but a kind of banner year to expand this.
It will.
For the last year, you and I have talked about expanding the engagement and the reach, because this conversation isn't just a top-down thing. This conversation isn't just about CEOs or business owners, and it's not even just about leadership as it's hierarchical, as people define it in a hierarchy. It's leadership and our ability to lead one another and also to follow one another. Well, here's the proverb. Proverbs 11:25, the generous soul will be made rich, and he who waters will also be watered himself. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Leo Bottari, that's LeoBottary.com. Check out everything that Leo is doing, and we thank you for listening and hope you and your family have a safe and happy New Year. To learn more about our show and what we do, to submit questions to us, and to subscribe to What Anyone Can Do podcast, please visit our website, whatanyoneCanDo.com. What Anyone Can Do podcast is hosted by Leo Bottari and me, Randy Cantrell. Music provided by Kevin MacLeod is Vibe Ace, licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 3.0 license. Thanks for watching or listening. We hope you'll share the podcast.